Welcome to the Conversion Tracking Podcast. My name is Kayle Larkin. I'm the head of marketing at Elevar, and I'm joined here today by two absolutely amazing marketers, Mia and Kristina. I'll let you introduce yourselves. If you could tell us, for anyone who's new to you, what's your role? Where are you at? How are you more agency side, more brand side? I'll let Mia kick it off and then we'll pass over to Kristina.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, and I know we're going to have a blast. I'm Mia Umanos. I run Clickvoyant. I'm the CEO and founder of that. Clickvoyant is an agency of sorts, but we only do analytics and experimentation. We are data scientists for e-commerce companies. And I've been like both sides, both in-house and agency. I will say that I skew a little bit more agency side, coming from like Omnicom, JWT, really big agencies. But at those agencies, there wasn't really a focus on shopper behavior, which is my personal passion because I love psychology, understanding why people are loyal to brands. And so I basically spun off Clickvoyant as a result of that and trying to make that accessible to brands who typically can't afford it. We're not all Mattel or Toyota. And so how can we use AI to make that more accessible to smaller brands? And yeah, that's what we do all day long. Kristina.
Great. Hi, I'm Kristina Toth. I have spent my career on the brand side. So I'm a marketing leader with 12 years of experience in e-com and retail, and from large Fortune 100 companies down to fast-growing e-com brands that are launching, such as Apple's non-alcoholic spirits, Saludos, Leven Bakery, and most recently I oversee digital and social media at Hannaford, which is a Northeast supermarket that's part of Ahold Delhaize. So I specialize in digital customer experiences all the way from paid and organic channels down to converting and post-purchase. So I've led teams in terms of site launches to campaign rollouts and getting sites and brands ready for big traffic times like Q4 and Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So I think this is my 13th Q4, 14th Q4. But I started on the retail side, so definitely like being as customer centric as possible. So really excited to be here.
Yay, I'm really excited you both could join me today. And Kristina kind of set us up there. I feel like I need like the drummer. We are talking about the topic that is flooding everybody's inboxes and ad rolls and just their dreams and everything right now as we're heading into Q4. We're talking about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, BFCM, and I wanted to kind of take a different angle and not necessarily like what should your ads look like and how are you acquiring, but one of the things that Elevar, here's our customers doing is we have this, do you do a code freeze or do you test, right? It's the highest traffic point in their year, and some brands choose to do code freezes and some brands continue testing. So to kick off our chat here today, just kind of, visceral reaction when you hear the question, do we test during BFCM? What's your first instinct?
I mean, this is something that I'm so passionate about. It's not do we, but how do we? Because it is the year. It makes the year for many brands. Right. And, I think as the data science partner to so many brands, like even Elevar, we're partnered with you, a lot of times, like if we don't test it, we don't really understand what actually happened. Like when you're reviewing Q4, it's like, well, I think this is why Q4 performed the way it did, whether you did well or you didn't do well. You're like, I think this is what led to the data looking the way it does, but you don't know.
I agree. Mia and I have talked about this for for a long time, and we've tried to convince folks to think about code freezes differently. And to Mia's point, testing can mean so many different things. So what the amount of testing and multivariate testing can mean anything from making sure that you have everything's teed up and doing your pre-work ahead of time. I think it's just such a miss if you don't take advantage of this period of time when it's so important and integral, because these customer behaviors are so different than any other time of year.
Right. And that you're teeing me up again, Christina. I love this. So we're talking, let's talk more. Let's talk like dive into that a little bit more. What is that? Could you walk us through like what does the lead up look like? What's happening behind the scenes when you're kind of talking about pre BFCM and setup and things that you should have ready to make that?
I mean, I think it's most important that you think very much ahead of time. What is your objective for Black Friday, Cyber Monday? Also, in making sure that you roll with the punches of things change next year, where it's going to be election season. So that's going to make an entirely different experience for next year versus this year. So making sure that you're teed up far ahead of time to ask, what do you want to learn? What is so important for the business? So that you can really set yourself up and to prioritizing what you need to learn and what is important to set up and test beforehand, so that you during that time you have everything running like well-oiled machine. I'm a huge person around setting up QA test scripts far and weeks ahead of time. I'm in a process right now where at Hannaford launching and replatforming our website that is in our app, and that's been years in the making. And there's so many teams that are included, not only marketing, it's everyone has a role in these rollouts. So making sure that everyone plays their part and the planning is tight far beforehand, so that you're not scrambling at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to add too, because I think some people who are listening might not know what you mean by like, oh, and then next year's going to be an election season, because they might not realize like how that's going to impact their business, and that just means eyeballs are going to be diverted, right? Like even during the Q4, any brand is competitive to anything that is happening in the digital space. Oh, Kaylee, you went out on your mic a little bit.
I mute myself because I think out loud a lot and I I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. But I was like, yeah, when you said that, it was like, yes, you're not just competing within people within your niche or your market, your segment, you're competing for attention.
Well, and you're competing for attention. That's like competition number one. It's like competing for the attention in the space. Like if, something happens at the Kardashians, your traffic can go down, right? Like that's compete number one. Compete number two is it's gift buying season. So it's not like, oh, I might buy that fly fishing reel and I'm competing against other fly fishing companies. It's like I'm competing against all gifts that are potentially in the persona of
And on
my.
that note too, I think it's also depends on the economical atmosphere at the time. So
Ah,
every time there's an election, usually are we going, I mean, with the tariffs this year, you're anticipating, how is this going to impact the consumer mindset of buying the product? Where does that sit? I mean, if you're in beauty, when we saw in 2020 during COVID, remembering, oddly enough, red lipstick, for example, was, you would not think that would spike in terms of interest, but it did, because those little joys and identifying moments were important to customers at the time, because they didn't have another outlet. So these are thinking about how the different economical spheres can impact that customer mindset and preparing for those.
And that's the thing, like that's a critical part, the customer mindset that can be tested. Like we're not really talking like change your payment platforms, right? Like that should absolutely be frozen, right? Like don't touch that kind of stuff that are typical operational things. But so many of our customers, when they first come to us, don't know who their shopper is. right? Or like, oh, well, we started out with like making these bags for this kind of person. And here we are like 5 years later, making like $10 million. And now we have no clue who's here anymore. And all of those external components have implications long term. Like if you are a beauty brand and you don't know that in a recession that sales go up, that is like a highly competitive moment for you. And in that moment, the psychology of why she buys can be apparent if you're message testing. Like, treat yourself, like all these other like, psychological biases that people are introducing to your website when they come and start clicking places. Like, for example, like it's like the reward yourself, or buy it now, or like have this and this with this gift, like a lot of things like site wide 25%. I mean, these things that we typically do, we're usually pushing on like some kind of a sale, but you wouldn't necessarily have to if you understand the environment and if you knew what happened last time there was a recession. And that's the kind of insight that I feel like people are missing when they code freeze and they don't change anything on the site during such an important time.
I let's I want to circle back just a little bit because you touched on it, Mia, and I want to make sure that our audience caught that. So when we're talking about code freeze, we're talking about freeze versus testing, right? We're not talking about test your payment processor. That should be something that you don't touch during this high traffic, high sales time. We're talking about messaging and making sure that we're versus couponing. Or could you go into what are we talking about with a freeze and what are we talking about with testing? Just get definitions out of the way.
Well, I mean, I think it varies from brand to brand, but we certainly work with some brands who are like, we don't touch anything in Q4. Like we do not touch anything. We do all of our development and then we let the site rest. So no changing, no code, no code changes, no front end changes, nothing.
And that puts you at a really big risk sometimes, because to your point, what is the definition of testing? I would say if you are not allowing anything to change, we like to set up, for example, feature flags so that if this is your first time having a new cart, for example, that exists and you have not tested it with this amount of traffic, it is a risk in looking at adding new features, but also pushing it to its limits. So making sure that you are set up from a code perspective to be able to roll back if needed. So, I mean, it's happened before, in my world at least, where you're halfway through Black Friday, Cyber Monday week, and you realize something's broken, whether it's a promo code, if it's the creative is not clear, any of that, you need to be able to have your developers on point to be able to roll back or push it to a previous state. And so when we say testing, I think those are not typically what people are thinking about. There are opportunities for you to need to be able to react and be agile. And that means that potentially has the opportunity to need to make a code change in the middle of the process.
I like that. And just to kind of reiterate and make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying, because if you're going into, the holiday season, high traffic season, and you have changed your website or your app or your platform, let's say over the summer, and you're going in, I mean, in essence, you are testing that new feature at this high traffic volume. You are still testing. And if you're completely frozen, now that puts you at a risk because are you going to be able to, as you said, I love the word agile, so I'm going to use that. Are you going to be able, is a full freeze, are you able to stay agile? Because in a sense, you are still testing. Mia, do you have anything to add, or maybe risks or rewards with freeze versus testing?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting from your operator standpoint how it's like, oh, well, that's also a test. I mean, when I think of, and it's, maybe that's something that we should like clear up too, because like, oh, you think of that as a test, because I think of that as like, you know, bug fixing and backlog monitoring, right? Like I in my mind, because like, we're data scientists. And so like we're the science marketing arm of a lot of our brands that we work with. But Kristina, anybody in your role has like so many different definitions of that role. I do paid media, I do Klaviyo and the website and the merchandising and the operations of and some people are like in marketing and some people report to operations. And so I think it really depends. So your perspective is so interesting because that to me is like it's like technology stress testing, right? And I think that that's important to do, and it doesn't even actually cross my mind as a data scientist that that's part of like what the scope would be, because in my mind like it's all like understanding like the messaging, the consumer behavior, A/B testing this versus that. How can we change the economies of behavior on an e-commerce platform to influence better outcomes and deeper loyalty? So that's kind of like how I think about it. And when I say that, it's like, oh, maybe what we should be calling this experimentation. So I think vocabulary is just a funny thing that gets us hung up sometimes. But yeah, that's absolutely testing too.
Yeah, like there's something as simple as is not, it doesn't necessarily require code, like testing, pushing to a PDP, a traffic to a PDP, and then versus pushing to the homepage during that period. Maybe don't have an official test set up, but in the media world, that is a test for themselves. Maybe they're doing lift test and they're not actually setting it up on the back end, but they are doing those types of tests without a code implementation. Those are,
Mhm.
I think that's where identifying what does that mean? What does a code freeze mean? What does testing mean?
Right.
And what are the different players and parts that come into it?
Right. I don't know if that answered your question exactly,
It
Kaylin.
did. Yeah, totally. I think I already know the answer to my next question, but I'm going to toss it out there anyways. So, where do you land? Where do you land on, the spectrum between full freeze and testing?
For me, I get scared when I think about technology breaking. Like I'll start out with that. Like, I don't like to be in charge of that. I like to be in charge of proper behavior and conversion outcomes all the way up and down the funnel. In terms of like things breaking because the technology is wrong, I actually like to keep that. Like I think that's back of the house operations, logistics, shipping, it working. Like is the theme, the existing theme functioning properly with all the bells and whistles on it. That's stuff that I like, keep that, don't touch that, don't retheme, don't do a complete redesign like the day before. um Other things that we don't like to test necessarily are like a complete navigation overhaul, like like global items, like a complete navigation overhaul. And now here's where the nuance is. Things that I do like to test are, a lot of companies aren't using their navigation as a merchandising opportunity. A lot of companies use the navigation as like, here's everything that we have. But the psychology of that buyer is like, they're coming in with their, like biases and mental shortcuts. And so if you put like everything in the kitchen sink in the navigation, they're going to like, where the heck do I find this? So like testing navigation as a merchandising opportunity to be like, these are our best sellers, best gifts. Sometimes you don't see brands doing that during the time frame. And then everything related to offer, placement, merchandising is on the table. Absolutely.
100%. I think this is the biggest opportunity for us to learn the most. And if you don't take advantage of this time period, you're not going to be able to bring those insights to Q1. So I think it's so important that you have a plan that tallies up to. I know that this is usually the time when budgets and targets for the next year are are not even finalized for many organizations or companies or brands. But I think this is the time period where that can help to solidify some of the asks that are being made. And without that data, you're not going to be well situated. So a lot of the time, I'm actually trying to, if possible, try to put this so that it's Q4 is not at the end of the planning cycle. It's actually either the beginning or the middle, so that it is not butted up against that Q1 break, because I do know that period between holiday, then switching to holiday, and then Q1 is different for every single brand, and a lot of time people are out, so you don't really have a lot of time to uh, make that migration over to that next year strategy too. So I think it's
Mhm.
important thinking about the context of where do you sit within the organizational planning as well.
Honestly, you told me this story a lot of times, like, okay, what does January look like? And it's just like, honestly, it's a lot of times it's like a cluster.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, what happened? We're like, we don't know. But here's my budget request, right? Like, I can't even imagine going into January, like, not having, okay, here's how these behave for the segments. Like, okay, toys company, for example. Okay, here's how things sold and how people reacted in the 8 to 9 category, like the toddler category, like the teenager category. Like, if you did go in with that data, if you're like a toy company that's even like making $10 million a year, like, I was just like, how do you do it? How do you possibly have that conversation?
I mean, it's these are tough. I'm sure people that are listening are. I would hope you're nodding your heads, because everyone. I don't know anyone that goes into Q1 feeling really confident. The last brand I worked directly with was a non-alcoholic spirits brand. Our Super Bowl is dry January, and you coming out of Black Friday, Cyber Monday into then holiday period when people are drinking a lot, into then January 1st, you need to have that seamlessness, and sometimes your financial calendar does not line up. And so that's where Mia has taught me those CRO roadmaps, and uh, preaching to the choir, but it's so important for they're so important for brands, is to really establish what are you looking to learn, and so that you can pick up on January 1st and feel like you already have a plan in place, even though that might change and shift dependent on upper leadership and organizational changes. It helps you to have a backlog of, okay, what are some of the ideas that already existed, and maybe we tweak that or shift that, so you really have a playbook already established into going into Q1.
Mm-hmm.
So part again, bear with me as I'm like, gathering your insights and trying. It's sounding like pre-BFCM, super important to have an objective, like have something that you're wanting to know or learn from it. I also love thinking about, Kristina, when you said like thinking about Q4 as like the start of your planning. I think especially like health and wellness brands, because health and wellness brands going into Q1, like that's actually kind of their busiest season. So using Q4, having that objective, knowing what you need to learn to make Q1, your big money, especially within health and wellness. So I do want to tap into Mia and Kristina. You said you learned some CRO things. So let's, use our last few minutes here to learn from Mia's like CRO expertise. And Kristina, you can feel free to chime in with examples of like, yes, I saw this types of results from that. But like, what are you, maybe I know what reports or what signals are you looking at from your users, the behavior to tell you, here's how I can collect that, here's how I can
Mm-hmm.
implement that in order to put that strategy together.
Okay, I have a lot to say about this. Like, I'm gonna try to be brief because we don't
I
have a
was
lot of
like,
time, but I'm just
that's
gonna
a
say,
big question.
number one, that behavioral data that is in Elevar rarely gets used. Rarely gets used. We have a lot of your partners who come to us and are just like, hey, we need to understand what's going on with our conversion rate. I'm like, have you ever looked at this? And they're like, no. Right? They look at their conversions, they look at their ROAS, they look at all of the things that are like running the business, and yet they forget to see how they've done the merchandising. I think merchandising in general is so overlooked by brands that are under Fortune 500s. Like brands that are 30, $50 million annual revenue still ignore the merchandising component, or they might have somebody who's like, oh, I manage the SKUs and I manage the merchandising. Not the same thing. Okay. Merchandising is psychology, and digital, it's very much like tapping into somebody's bias. And if they're not doing it that way, they are not merchandising. So I would say that, CRO, I just think that the biggest learnings that you can have are, how does she respond? What, when a lot of our brands are designing their websites, they're designing them to be very beautiful for the very rational buyer. And 90% of shopping behavior decisions, particularly on mobile, are done with a subconscious. And so, I mean, I'm willing to bet that 90% of your visitors have 80% mobile traffic. That's just what it's looking like. And so, if you're not designing your site and your merchandising, if you're not merchandising at all, if your merchandiser is not in psychology or science or behavioral scientist, these are some things to start like using CRO for. CRO is not for testing a backlog. CRO is like, okay, yeah, we're lovely partners with Visually and Shoplift as well. And it's wonderful that they have templates, but testing a template, is this good, is this good, isn't necessarily science.
And also, you can, some of the things that you thought would work during one period do not work at another period. So that, I think, being humble in what we know, and especially going, me and I have worked with so many different types of brands, whether or not it can be a short impulse purchase, or some of these, more luxury brands, or higher price points that take a long time and a long lead time to actually convert over periods of time. So I think it's also really important to think about the funnel and think about the intention of that visit in particular. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to Mia's point, almost all conversions are usually on mobile, and so is the introduction. The question is, okay, well, what leads up to that decision making during that period of time, and when they are at any point in that journey, what are they looking to learn in that next period of time, and utilize that, how much information you're and what part of the product you're really trying to sell at that moment from that channel.
Yeah, I mean, the decision science part is the part that's missing from, like, I would say 90% of CRO programs. Like, CRO programs are run by like, the developer or the designer or whatever, but the decision science part is like the part that a lot of people miss. And then they're like, oh, CRO doesn't work. I'm like, no, you just tested templates. You didn't get into the psychology of the buyer. And so that's where the real win is in CRO and experimentation. It's like, what actually works? Is it because we've been 100 years in like whatever bra science? Or is it because you just need to feel comfortable and not get that like fat roll in the back, right?
Right.
Mia, something that you taught me very early on is make a hypothesis. What's your hypothesis? This is so important to me, is saying, okay, what is the hypothesis around consumer behavior? Because a lot of the time when people are saying, okay, we're going to test this, you're solving for the wrong thing. So you really need to make sure that when it comes to what is it that you're trying to test and why, I think that starts with a hypothesis, and you're looking to either confirm it or deny that hypothesis.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I
Yes.
do want to plug, Mia, if you fix what I'm going to say if I butcher it, but Mia has a great online way, like online lessons to learn more about CRO and what we're talking about here, behavioral science CRO.
Yes, behavioral science CRO lab, where I have like psychology, how to use data, how to use Google Analytics, how to set up Google Analytics to make sure you have those behavioral data in there, because a lot of people don't, unless you have Elevar. So using that data, actually putting it to work, data in motion is where it becomes most valuable.
Yes. So we have like a minute or two left here. So let's say if you could say like one GA4 report to make sure you have that set up for BFCM, which one is that?
Oh,
I know. One.
This is like a real focus choice for me. Which of my children do I love the most? So if you have Elevar, then definitely look at your behavioral events and all of the actions and the event categories, and like starting to take a look at, the conversion rates of the event. So how many people click on this navigation? How many people like click these CTA? So anything that's in behavioral, that's my favorite. If you don't have Elevar, stop what you're doing, talk to, and go to the Elevar website,
Gotta
plug that
get
in.
elevar.com.
Elevar.com. But if you don't have that, then other things that are somewhat insightful from Google Analytics reports, even if you think it's garbage, is the cart to detail conversion rate and the purchase to detail conversion rate. That comes out of the box. Everyone has it. It's rarely looked at, but it's the percentage of people who cart over a total sum of people who look at your product detail page. And that will tell you which ones suck and which ones are good. And then they'll give you a kind of like point the star on where to start looking at why some product detail pages perform better than others.
Great metrics. Those were my favorite back in my UA, Universal Analytics days. Let's say you are running a test. Maybe this is Kristina. Maybe you have, well, both of you, you're running a test. You're like, I'm running this. At what point, or like, what's the signal that you're looking at to tell you, like, pause, revert back, like this one's not working?
I think it will be dependent on the test and the volume that you have. So I think making sure that you understand like the amount of traffic that you're pushing to each test, I think is also really important. So making sure that you first of all, set it up so that if a test is broken in some way, that you can in some way push it so that it's 100% to that other variant. And it's easily accessible. I will just say that's really important that you set yourself up to be able to make those changes quickly. But usually I'm looking on a daily to see what that traffic and the conversion rate and traffic. So I'll look at the key KPIs, the traffic and the bounce rate, and specifically like the add to cart and conversion details to be able to understand if that is changing over time. And then if something is broken, you can revert to let's push 100% to a place that is working and it does not have that issue. But yeah, tell me if you have a difference of opinion.
I mean, it does really depend on the different kinds of tests. So like the way we think about it is like, kind of three things. It's like volume, as Kristina mentioned, percent change of the metrics. The metrics that we're typically looking at is because we're doing shopper behavior economies, is like we're looking at revenue per visitor, we're looking at average order value, and we're looking at conversion rates. And so even if we're making something in the homepage, like traditionally, if you're doing a homepage test, you want to see if people click through. But if any of those other metrics dip below a certain amount of conversion versus like with a certain amount of, so like, I'll give you an example. Like we did a homepage test just recently, and after 2 days, the conversion rate and the revenue per visitor had dipped like 30%. And we were like, okay, we're going to stop this. We have to go back to the drawing board and figure out like what happened, even though it was a homepage test and the click-through rate was high. So those are just guardrails to keep you safe. But know that even after those 2 days, I have the data, not only inside the CRO, but I have it in Google Analytics to just start to dig into what happened. Because the explainability of outcomes is the key to success in CRO. Like the explainability of what we learned, how we found out, where the data is. A lot of people don't have that learning plan. They're just like, let's just throw it up there. And so that, and then if they don't know why it worked, like a lot of tests are inconclusive. So I think, so those are the metrics that we look to keep us safe, but then we also have the data to try to figure out the why behind variant A and B.
Awesome. I have additional questions, but it would be like kind of, well, I'll toss them out and feel free to grab them. My brain was going while you were talking, and I was thinking, right, one of the things with Elevar, because we are also sending that behavioral event data, and if you're looking at what they're doing, but also we could be looking at who's doing it, which I would assume during this time of year is extremely important, whether that's, net new customer And are they, are they coming to buy a gift, or is this a returning customer?
Mhm.
And are they purchasing self gifts? Are they purchasing gifts for families or friends? Um, I guess I don't have a full question here. It was just thoughts while you were talking and wondering how do you layer that in, I guess.
Of course, you're a psychologist and data scientist because that's exactly what, that's how you should be running your program is like when I would say that 80% of tests that we run, especially when we're getting to know a client, are inconclusive. That's just the fact. Like if agencies are out there, oh, we guarantee like this lift. Like it's just like Kristina and I look at it like that's impossible. Like it's impossible to do. What you're doing is yes, it's called conversion rate optimization, but it really should be like, oh, we are tribal knowledge optimization of our customers and the segments they're in, right? That's
I like
really what we're
that.
trying to do.
Yes.
And when you go back into GA, lots of these tools have Google Analytics integrations that
Right.
never get looked
Yep.
at. When you're like,
Yep.
okay, now I have A versus B, I can do segmentation analysis on not only traffic sources, but detailed into the campaigns, detailed into first time user, detailed into did they watch the video or not? What were the
Right.
other things that colored that variant behavior right there in GA,
Right.
like the spot. Yeah.
I love it. I feel like we could talk probably hours and hours on this topic, but that is the end of our episode. Um, Thank you, Mia from Clickvoyant, and Kristina. I'm going to butcher a Hannaford supermarket.
Hannaford,
Yes.
yes.
Ah, yay! I didn't. Okay, and I am Kayle Larkin from Elevar, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.